This is Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert, and I'm Meredith. Around here, we explore taboo questions and societal blind spots. Each high contrast guest gives you the layered deep dive you crave, not just the Google results making headlines. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to inspire curiosity by exploring the nuance and paradox of our world. Each episode is different, so bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. Man, oh man, this is a fun one. Where are my fellow nerds at? You're going to love this. My guest is kind of a swearing scientist, an etymologist, and he answers the question, what makes a curse word a curse word? Will fat be a bad word in the near future? And why can some groups say words that others can't? We also have some fun with some unusual curse words from other cultures. You'll hear my favorite. And he explains why saying curse words in a foreign language doesn't feel as bad or as satisfying. And fair warning, there are several heavy hitters in the first 5 minutes, so mark this one not safe for work. But actually, we talk about that too. When is cursing in the workplace appropriate? And why does it make you like some people more and others less? It's a fun one. And if you've been a loyal listener, consider this your official invite to my private Facebook group. I regularly conduct polls to get an idea of what you're liking most, and I post content in there that I don't share anywhere else. Search MFR Curious Insiders on Facebook or click the link in the show notes to request to join. I hope to see you in there. Lastly, if you end up liking this episode, you'll also like the one about if skipping small talk is an option. It's episode 245. All right, friends, keep it curious. What makes a curse word a curse word? Are new curse words emerging? How do former slurs become reclaimed by marginalized groups they were meant to harm? Language. It's complicated. And it's the foundation of how we represent ourselves and connect with others. But it's often hard to pinpoint what words will attract or repel a certain audience. My next guest is a cognitive science professor at the University of California, San Diego. He's also the author of the book, What the F, and was featured in the Netflix series, The History of Swear Words. Today, he's going to share his specialized knowledge in the science of swearing and help us understand the origin of what makes a word bad. Fervent linguist, swearing scientist, foul-mouthed etymologist, Dr. Benjamin Bergen. Thanks for being here.
Hi, it's my pleasure.
This is such an interesting aspect of language because we all do it. So I would love to kick things off by asking you what your favorite swear word is.
Well, I mean, there's the one that I use most commonly, which is probably really boring. It's probably just something like shit, because lots of things happen in your life that just deserve a shit. But I guess most interesting, as you survey the world's languages, you find lots of creativity. In Australian English, I'm told that, okay, you're going to have to excuse me, there's just going to be a lot of profanity today.
You have full permission. Fire away, my friend.
So yeah, a friend of mine uses this term cunt waffle, which is just to me like it's the craziest combination of like abusive, like derogatory term and something delicious for breakfast. I think that it's like just as strong. I don't know what it actually means, but it's delightful to me.
I also find that delightful. And fun backstory on my side of the world. I didn't hear the word cunt until I was 20 or 21. Judge me as you wish, but I was working at a call center. And so it doesn't mean as much to me. Like I might as well be saying shit in German, and it just doesn't fire the things in my brain that other cuss words that I heard growing up and understand that they were taboo. Is there some science behind that?
Oh, yeah. You just hit the nail on the head. So the reason why curse words feel so powerful to us is exactly because of early childhood experiences. We are, during our formative years, open to training about what things have and should have what sort of emotional connotations. I remember the first time I said fuck in front of my mom, and I remember the punishment that was doled out as a consequence at whatever it was, 8 or 9 years old. We remember those things. And we also remember occasions where other people used swear words and they were in states of heightened emotional arousal, or maybe they had repercussions for using those. And those early childhood experiences get internalized. We code those in our brain. And as a consequence, later in life, those same emotional associations drive through our amygdalas and drive us to have physiological reactions that we don't have to words that we learn later in life, whether they're in our own language or in a second language. And this is why people who speak second and third languages don't find profanity in those other languages to be particularly offensive at all. It's easy, right? Because you don't have that gut feeling of being punished or observing strong emotions early in life.
Well, I don't know. The only maybe exception for me personally in that area is American Sign Language. And I love that you brought that up in your book and you had pictures and everything. I used to be a sign language interpreter, and the sign for fuck is pretty, I don't know, like that registered in my little brain. So I don't know, maybe because it has the visual component, you're like, ooh, yep, maybe I shouldn't say that one.
Yeah, so that's true. American Sign Language has this amazing thing that a lot of the signs, not all of them, of course, but some of the signs look like what they mean. And yeah, it's very hard to get away from the intended meaning. And there are lots of signs actually that are like that. And that's a really interesting feature of sign languages that we don't get with spoken languages in anything like the same degree. Like there's sound symbolism. You can sort of sound like what you mean, but it's not the same impact for sure.
So cuss words have this very early onset effect with our child brains, but are they considered bad words because they offend other people, or is it the sound of the word itself? Somehow it's a magic formula that makes it a cuss word.
It's complicated. In English and in most languages around the world, there are certain sources for swear words. They come from particular domains of human experience, which themselves are usually taboo. So the taboo things in your life lend the vocabulary to talking in a taboo way. So around the world's languages, you have swearing typically drawn from sex, from bodily functions, from slurs, so ways to speak derogatorily about other people, and then religious terminology. And there are lots of taboos about when and where you can use any of those words, religious words, and so on. And so those words, which are oftentimes used with sort of taboo intent or taboo consequences, come to acquire that taboo themselves over the course of cultural time. And so if you look at English, you can think about the taboo words. Most of them are drawn from one of those four categories, and it's true around the world. But of course, that's not enough, right? Like we have lots of words relating to bodily functions that are not swear words that I use with my preschooler or that you could use with your priest or whatever it is. You can talk about these taboo things with non-taboo words. So there's something else going on. And part of that is exactly, as you say, the sort of early childhood experience of how those words are used. But another thing is how they sound. So in English, we do kind of have a formula for what makes a word seem particularly taboo. It has to be short. Usually it's one syllable. There are longer ones, but the majority are one syllable. And they tend to have lots of consonants and consonants in the right places. So at the beginnings and the ends. And it helps if they're what we call stop consonants, or these popping sounds, all the ones that you're not supposed to say in front of a microphone too loud, like the puzz and the tuz and the cuz. Yeah. And if you get lots of those, you're going to sound like a swear word. And I'm sure you can think of lots of swear words that end with cuz and tuz and puzz. We've already mentioned one or two. So yeah, there's sort of a couple of different things that go into it. But really, it is a cultural construct, right? We decide that this word at this time, for our purposes, is going to be one of the ones that we ban, we punish kids for using, or we bleep out when it's on television, and so on.
Well, I want to touch on the slurs part that you just mentioned, because my brother has cerebral palsy and he was on a wheelchair basketball team growing up. And the kids that had spina bifida referred to themselves as biffs. And there were certain aspects of being an athlete and having spina bifida. And I guess one of them is what they called biff stench, which was a smell that came from the person related to being sweaty in the wheelchair. I'm not really sure why the other kids who are also in wheelchairs didn't have that. But if someone would have said that who was not a part of the wheelchair basketball team, like in the team, it would be offensive. So how much of the development of these slur words originate from the people groups themselves, and how many of them are from people outside trying to put the people down?
Almost without exception, they come from the outside. And we see them emerging now. So biff is one I hadn't heard before. Similar ones are maybe like spurg for people with Asperger's syndrome, that are sort of, these things are sort of starting to emerge as the phenomena come more and more into people's consciousness. But yeah, they almost entirely come from the outside. But what you're describing is a kind of a co-opting or a reappropriation of those terms that happens, which is really, really common and oftentimes is quite successful, where people will decide, okay, so we're being marginalized. People are trying to use this term against us to describe us. What if we can sort of take some of the wind out of the sails of that term by just reappropriating it. So, okay, no, you can't call us that. We call ourselves that. Like slut walks, like this is a thing that people have decided to sort of take over the word slut. There's a bar that a friend of mine mentioned, an LGBT bar that has faggoty ass Fridays as a way to kind of reclaim the word and say, okay, no, it's fine to use the word because we use it in a positive way and it's what defines us. It doesn't always work to reclaim words. I think you can probably imagine and come up with some slurs that have not succeeded in being reappropriated and that they haven't taken away the sting. But you're describing as kind of a second layer on top of that. So when people who are not members of that group are allowed to use that word, why is that? Why is it not offensive for your brother, for example, to use that term, even though he doesn't have spina bifida? This is a thing that happens in groups of tight-knit people, usually it's same-sex groups, and usually it's people who are younger, who work together, play together. Sports is a really great example of when it happens. But, I've heard the same things from stockbrokers and realtors and people who work in restaurants, that when you're in a group of, again, a tight-knit group of people who are oftentimes going through something very challenging together, you're working together, there's a thing that can happen, which is that you give permission to everyone to become an insider, even in groups that they wouldn't otherwise be members of. So you're an honorary X or an honorary Y, and you get to use terms that normally would be insider terms, that you can only use it in that context. You can only use it with your friends on the team who have spina bifida. I'm sure you see your brother using it with other people who have spina bifida, right? They would have no idea that he had permission. So this is a cultural thing that happens, and it's a really pervasive phenomenon. It's something that shows that the words themselves aren't bad, right? The words are used in a particular social context for a particular purpose. They can be used to harm. They can be used for things that we would think of as immoral, but they can also be used to sort of cement solidarity and create social connection and create informality and trust and be at the service of actually a positive social function sometimes.
God, language is so weird. It's so bizarre. The rules that are and evolving and the words that evolve with the rules. It makes me think about the future of curse words, up and coming curse words, or maybe the curse word isn't the right description. Maybe it's just taboo words. I feel like fat is becoming a taboo word. I've seen it blurred out on YouTube for a while, but in Latin culture, it's even if you're just like 20 pounds overweight, and this is Latin culture in the US and my experience with Latin culture in Latin America, it's not uncommon to call a person gordo, like fatty, basically. And no one's offended by it. Like, it's not a big deal, really. It's just kind of a fact. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I admired the thick-skinned aspects of my Latin friends, being able to be a little bit more blunt in many areas of their life. Do you think that the words that we're canceling, the words that we're prohibiting, is creating a society of pansies, or that we should take a cue from our Latin neighbors? Or are there benefits to censoring certain words and telling others, hey, now that's a word we can't say anymore?
Yeah, this is what academics like, but it is complicated. I think that there are lots of sides to this. On the one hand, it's totally understandable that people should feel like they have the power to decide what they're called. That doesn't seem like a crazy idea, right? And certainly terms that we think of as particularly offensive, like the top slurs that clearly are meant to cause harm, have done so for hundreds of years based on ethnicity or religion or sexual orientation. Like we get it. Like we can understand why someone would say, no, don't call me that. But there's that side to it. The other side to it is prohibition doesn't really work.
Oh, God. Can you say that louder for the people in the back?
Yeah. I mean, this is true. So like, how abstinence-only education has stopped all teen pregnancies in all of the states in which it's been implemented?
Totally.
Well, language is different. So the thing that happens when you prohibit someone from doing something, language in particular, and especially adults, but also kids, is that they just view it as something desirable to do, right? They say, oh, wow, hold on. You don't like it when I do this? That must mean that it has power over you. And this is exactly the opposite of the logic of reappropriation, of taking over bad terms. It's kind of the idea that we can silence this word. I mean, I understand the impulse, but I think that it's counterproductive because it just gives people fodder to know what the buttons are that they can press. And we live in a society in which you really can't regulate language to that degree. I mean, social media platforms can try, but they don't ban words like fat, and they probably never will. And so it really ends up being kind of It's a persuasion campaign that's probably without teeth and I sense is going to fail just like all the other ones typically do. As a child, I got punished for using the word fuck, as I said earlier. That's clearly stopped me. And I just sense that it's precisely the same thing. I think that advocating for sensitivity to like, what do people feel causes them harm? That is a totally legitimate thing. Like, how do we want to talk about weight? How do we want to talk about obesity? Having a conversation about that is totally legitimate and understandable. I think people should be forthcoming in what they feel, what is offensive to them. But at the same time, trying to ban it, I just don't see how it would work.
Hey, Curiositors, just a quick pause to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals. From time to time, I recommend other podcasts you might like. And here's one I know that you're going to love. It's the Jordan Harbinger Show. I love it because it's smart without being too highbrow and 1,000% ADD friendly. I know, you love it already. I'm a genuine true fan. When I have time to listen to podcasts just for pleasure, not, guest research, the Jordan Harbinger Show is my automatic choice. It's like when you're hungry and someone asks you what you want, and then before you even have a minute to think about it, you find yourself at Chick-fil-A because, obviously, Jordan's the Chick-fil-A of podcasts. Some of my favorites include the one with the man held hostage by Somali pirates, that's episode 115, and the pain psychologist about how pain lives in the brain, not in the body, episode 661. You can't go wrong with adding the Jordan Harbinger Show to your rotation. It's incredibly interesting, and there's never a dull show. Search for The Jordan Harbinger Show, that's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. The Florida Panhandle isn't just the home of your favorite podcaster. That's me, by the way. Shameless, I know. But it's also a go-to spot for a lot of families on vacation. Don't plan a Pensacola trip without getting tickets to the UWF Historic Trust. It's good for a whole week, and it's a great indoor activity option. You'll recognize Trader John's where I record the show in the Pensacola Museum of History. Get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. historicpensacola.org. Now back to the show. Remember to stay till the end where I give you a sneak peek of next week's episode. It doesn't seem like a smart way to improve society by just going, nope, that's on the no-no list. It seems like a more intelligent way to improve our relationships with others by having these more complex conversations. But, I can see why people would be tempted just to be like, nope, we're canceling that word. We're getting rid of it. We're removing it from our vocabulary. But then as language evolves, the rules change and a word, what was it, God, by God's eyes or something back in the Renaissance day? Like anything that had like a body part of God was offensive. And now instead of being offensive, people would just be confused. If you said, by God's eyes, they'd be like, and?
Well, that's for sure. I mean, what we do see, one change that's happening right now is that for younger people in particular, but I think across the society in general, the terms that are judged to be most used to be words related to bodily functions and sex. And before that, like you're saying in the 19th century, religious terminology. That's all changing so that now the words that people find most offensive really are the slurs. I survey undergrads. Admittedly, they're undergraduates at UC San Diego. That's a biased sample in a place that is not representative of the whole country. But nevertheless, the words that they find most offensive, I mean, fuck is number 24 on the list. Right? There are 23 more offensive words, and they are almost without exception words that denigrate people based on identity features. So that's a shift that's happening in real time that we can actually see, where words that offended our parents, sucks. Like my parents would not abide the word sucks in their house. I'm probably a little older than you. And for us, that was like gold. It's great. This is how to get it. This is how to get it under their skin. To our kids, so I'm a generation that knows that it was once an offensive word. My kids have no idea that sucks could possibly be offensive. Right? That's completely changed in the span of 60 years in those two generations that went from deeply offensive, can't say it on television, can't say it on radio, wouldn't say it in school, to saying in kindergarten. And we're seeing that happen now with, I think that probably words, the body part and sex terms are on their way out. And really what we're going to be dealing with moving forward is the slurs as the kind of offensive language that we have to reckon with. And as you say, it's in a complex way.
Unless cunt waffle takes off. And then this could be the great thing that saves us because I do like that quite a lot. When you talked about the different categories of curse words, meaning sexual acts, excrement, that sort of thing, you're talking a lot about the common traits of what we consider curse words in the United States and I think maybe like Australia. But different cultures have a preference for different categories of curse words. Is there a correlation between the category preference and certain characteristics of that culture? Is it
Right. Well,
telling of something?
there are correlations. It's hard to always to disentangle causation from correlation. But in this case, it's pretty clear that cultures that have a strong religious tradition, we can see that, for example, in cultures that have a strong Catholic tradition, do still rely very heavily on religious terminology for their swearing or their cursing vocabulary. So in Spanish, in Italian, in the French spoken in Quebec, the strongest terms are terms that specifically come from Catholic concepts. So in Quebecois, tabarnak, which means tabernacle, the word that means I'm not Catholic. What's the thing that the cup that caught?
Chalice.
The chalice, right? Yeah. These are the strongest words in Italian and in Spanish. So, porco dio, which is pig god, is like a super terrible strong word in Italian. So this is where a culture with a long history of religious practice and belief will tend to drop most of its swear words from. But, it differs. There's some just random stuff. So like in Dutch, you get these really strong swear words that are drawn from words for diseases. So the degree of fatality of the disease correlates with the strength of the term. So cancer is a really strong swear term.
What?
Tuberculosis is maybe not quite as strong, this sort of thing. But again, you can kind of understand because like diseases are taboo in the sense that you don't want to get one and you stay away from people who have them. And so those terms then become these words that are particularly strong and you want to avoid the words and so on. So yeah, there's some sort of cultural correlates, but then in some cases just, well, this is a culture that has decided they're going to double down on animal terms, which are, again, animals have taboos in their own ways, or on ancestor terms or whatever.
Yeah. And then in the same language, things can mean different things. Not to make it more complicated, but Spanish for strawberry in Mexico, it means like a snotty, rich bitch, basically. And I thought it was a derogatory word for vagina in another country, but I couldn't verify that on the internet. But the point is, you're in the US and you ask for a strawberry in Spanish, and then you go to Mexico and somebody calls you a strawberry, and there you go. It's a different meaning. Are there languages where there's no curse words?
Well, so it can kind of go in two ways, right? There are languages where there are strong words, but they're not viewed as bad. So, if you go to France or Germany or whatever, they have strong words, but you'll hear those words on the nightly news. And your kindergartner is able to say those words. They're really more thought of as strong words or big words or whatever it is. That's one way in which you can have the impact of the words, but without all the taboos about being able to use them. It's basically just, this is an expression of a strong emotion or a way to evoke strong emotions in other people. In some cultures, it's been documented that there isn't really much of a tradition of swear words at all. Japan is such a case where you don't really have a tradition of words that themselves are intrinsically bad to the point where you would bleep them out, for example, on television or radio, or that you would tell someone, oh, don't say that word, that's a bad word. What you have is lots of ways to offend people, right? You can insult people, but the specific words that you would use aren't ones that you wouldn't use in front of your grandmother or your kindergartner or your priest or whatever. So now that's changing now because of the influx of Western cultural values, and they see television that has bleeps in it coming from the United States and movies, and they're okay, well, I guess there's some words that are really bad. And I think that most of at least in Japan, most of the taboo words that they have are now borrowed mostly from English. And so they think of those as the taboo words. For them, the taboo words are the English taboo words. But surely there are other cultures that have similar features like that.
I would have thought Japanese would be a super fun language to cuss in. I'm so disappointed in this new information.
So Ichiro, Japanese baseball player who played in the States for 20 years or however long, he used to say that he would swear in English and Spanish and would say that he loves English and Spanish because he can swear in them, unlike Japanese, which there's no way to say all these things that you would need to say as a professional baseball player.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, that is fascinating. Makes me think about the Spanish curse words that I know and how I was asking friends, how bad is it? Is this because you hear it on movies? And then, it's confusing because you greet each other like, ¿Qué pedo? Like, which is what fart, but it means, hey, what's up, man? Oh, man, I love this stuff. I nerd out in linguist stuff. So Audience, forgive me for being a bit gratuitous on this subject, but we'll move on to the issue of connectivity. I think a well-placed curse word in the right context, in the right audience, builds some sort of trust. A little bit like what you were talking about earlier with the basketball team, but only like a standardized curse word, not something specific to a group of people. It makes the other person go, yeah, this person is just like me. But if you choose the wrong word or say it in the wrong way, or that person isn't receptive to it, it can repel them. So what's the difference between the relatability factor and the repelling factor when it comes to cursing socially?
Right. So any social context is going to have a set of rules, and there are going to be people who are the rule makers, right? So you can think of it, if you work in a place that has a sort of hierarchical structure, then it would be really surprising if the people driving the way that everyone talked were the people who had the least power, right? Typically, it comes from the top. So the boss can swear, and the people who are directly below the boss can kind of decide whether or not they're going to swear. They sort of feel out the boss, how okay is it, and people below them and so on. It's similar in any sort of social group, even if it's not hierarchical. There may be someone who's the most influential or popular or whatever leader of some group, and they're the one who sets the tone for how language is going to be used. Figuring out what the right way to use language in a particular context requires a lot of social sensitivity, right? You've got to first be an observer, figure out, okay, how does this work here? What can we get away with? What creates and foments comfort and informality, and how much informality is desirable here? Usually people will start small. So like they'll start with a shit and see how the shit goes. And then they'll work their way up to maybe a goddamn, maybe a fuck or whatever. You sort of like expand and see, like, feel people out. Okay, oh, that didn't go so well. That's even just within groups of people who have an opportunity to be on the same page. As you say, people's judgments about swearing hinge on what they already think about the person who's doing the swearing. So there's some evidence about this from behavioral studies showing that if you already believe and trust and are inclined to like a person who swears, then the swearing does exactly what you described. It makes you feel like they're more honest, like they're more direct, like they're more approachable, like they're less formal. And that can be very positive and that can be very effective. If you're already predisposed not to like that person, let's say they belong to a different political party, or let's say in an experiment, you've been manipulated so that you believe that they have done something bad in the past, then you are, when they swear, you're inclined to think bad things about them. So you're inclined to think related bad things about them, like that they're out of control, that they don't follow the rules, that they are overly emotional. And so swearing can kind of go either way, right? So either it can be beneficial to the people who are already inclined to like you, or it can be, unless you want people not to like you, it'll have a negative impact on the people who already weren't inclined to like you. And you sort of see this and not to get political, but you see this in political discourse all the time. I can't believe that person X, who is in the other political party, said this word. How terrible, how immoral. They should be censored. This shows all those bad things that I already knew about that person. Whereas if it's a person already in your party, good for them, right? They're speaking truth to power. They really believe this stuff, right? That shows that they're a man or woman of the people. And so, yeah, swearing, oftentimes super effective, sometimes divisive.
Wow. Well, it would be an interesting social experiment to start using Renaissance cussing and just see what happens, right? Talk about an icebreaker at work. By God's eyes, the printer is broken. Don't think it would have the same effect, but it would keep your coworkers laughing. I've seen a shift in the curse words that are used in advertising. I don't have linear television, like the regular, I don't have that. We have streaming services because we're not animals, but we really don't consume a lot of television. So the ads I'm talking about are mostly on social media and YouTube, and they use curse words. And then I've also noticed a slight change, although a slower one, in professional circles. You're talking about the hierarchy of the boss, the employee. I've observed people cursing in professional settings where I previously, in Nebraska at least, I live in Florida now, that would have been, although I lived in Nebraska 12 years ago. So also language changes a lot over a decade. But they wouldn't have cussed like that in a meeting that was considered professional. But now we have Zoom, which makes it feel more informal. And then, I don't know, it seems like it's shifting. In your research and in your studies, have you observed a shift in advertising and the professional spaces when it comes to like taboo language?
nothing that has been quantified yet. I mean, there's certainly increased profanity on social media in general.
Yeah.
I don't know about advertising per se. I mean, you can see it in lots of different sort of subgenres. So you see it in politician tweets, for example. You see it in the sort of aggregate amount of swearing that's observed. But unfortunately, I don't have a study that I can cite either way.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, there's these norms where we switch from our professional version of communicating to our Friday night at the bar version of communicating. And really, that's code switching. Do you think, because of your opinion about prohibition of words being about as effective as abstinence sex education, do you feel like if we all had the freedom, if you will, to speak in our most natural manner, that it would benefit society or create chaos?
I think this is a matter of taste. I think that really there are people who really believe that there is some value to having different registers of interaction, that formality serves a purpose. And I think that everyone agrees that formality of some types serves a purpose, right? Like it's nice to go to a gala and wear a tux or a dress or whatever it is that you wear to a gala. It's nice to have distinct modes of interaction with other people. And so I certainly understand that there are people who believe that it's nice to have places that don't have much swearing or any swearing. That presents a particular mode of interaction that's formal, and fine, I understand that. I don't think that the wheels of society would come off if people were to swear more in different environments that they currently don't swear much in for a variety of reasons. First of all, the same people who maybe don't swear when they're eating their oysters in their tuxedo do swear on the golf course the next morning. In addition, there are these other cultures that are very similar to ours. I mentioned France and Germany, where, again, it does not appear to be the case that all of a sudden they've lost all sense of social decorum simply because people swear more frequently. So it doesn't seem like it would be the end of the world. It's just, what do you want your society to be like? And of course, people are going to disagree on that.
No, they'll disagree on what they want society to be like. Get out. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I could talk forever about the subject. There's so much also that you covered in your book that we just don't have time practically to talk about, especially like the brain's reaction of different words. And I love just the different studies that you quote in here. It's just a fabulous book. So thank you for writing it. Tell people where they can keep in touch with you and where they can buy your books.
I think they can buy, so that's a book that I wrote about the F. There's another book called Louder Than Words, which is about kind of the science of how well you do what you're doing right now, which is to listen to words and translate them into meaning, which is a really hard thing that we all seem to be able to do. You can find me via the Google device. I have a website that describes my various activities. That's all. I'm just some professor somewhere.
Oh, I think you're a little bit more than that, but thank you. I would encourage everyone to check that book out. It's really fabulous. And thanks again for being on the show.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, you'll also like the one about if skipping small talk is an option. It's episode 245. And stay tuned next week for a very special feature where I introduce an easy and free way to support other indie podcasters like me, and to a show that I know that you're going to love. Until then, keep it curious.